You want people to trust you? Then stop performing, stop pretending, start showing up as someone who genuinely cares, because trust isn't built on titles or tactics, it's built on truth. People crave connection, real, raw, and rare. They open up when they feel safe, not judged. They follow those who make them feel valuable, not small. If you want others to believe in you, let them feel that you believe in them first. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind. And tell us, where are you watching from? Drop the mask. Let me tell you something that took me decades to understand. People can smell performance from a mile away. They might not know exactly what feels off, but their instincts tell them when someone isn't being real. And in that moment, trust becomes impossible. I've watched countless brilliant men and women fail to build genuine connections because they're too busy trying to appear perfect. They polish their words until they shine like glass, maintain a facade of unwavering confidence, and wonder why others keep them at arm's length. Here's the truth that changed everything for me. Trust isn't earned through perfection. It's earned through authenticity. Think about the people you trust most deeply in your own life. Are they the ones who never make mistakes? The ones who speak in practiced phrases and calculated responses? No. They're the ones who showed you their humanity, the ones who weren't afraid to say, "I don't know," or "I made a mistake." The ones who let you see behind the curtain of their carefully constructed image. I remember speaking with a young executive who couldn't understand why his team seemed distant, despite his impeccable track record. "I never show weakness," he told me proudly. "I always have the right answer." And there it was, the very reason his leadership felt hollow. He was playing a role instead of being a leader. Stop trying to be impressive. Start being real. Share your struggles alongside your victories. Let people see that you too face doubts and challenges. When you make a mistake, and you will, own it openly. These moments of vulnerability aren't weaknesses, they're opportunities to show others that you trust them enough to be genuine. The paradox that most people miss is this: the more you try to appear trustworthy, the less trustworthy you become. Trust isn't a performance. It's the natural result of being consistently authentic. I've seen rooms transform when someone has the courage to drop their mask. Suddenly, the air becomes lighter. Conversations become deeper. Real connections begin to form. Because when you show up as your true self, you give others permission to do the same. Remember this: people aren't looking for perfect leaders, perfect friends, or perfect partners. They're looking for real ones. They're looking for someone who has the courage to be human, to be fallible, to be genuine. So I challenge you today. What mask are you wearing? What carefully constructed image are you maintaining? And more importantly, what might happen if you had the courage to let it fall away? Trust begins the moment you stop performing and start being. It's that simple and that terrifyingly difficult. But I promise you this: on the other side of that fear lies the authentic connection you've been searching for all along. The power of listening deeply. Let me share something that transformed my understanding of human connection. The most powerful tool for building trust isn't in what you say, it's in how you listen. I spent years teaching people how to speak effectively, how to capture attention, how to command a room. But do you know what I discovered? The most trusted people in any room are often the quietest. They're the ones who have mastered the art of profound listening. Most people listen with the intent to reply. They're forming their response while the other person is still speaking. They're waiting for their turn, planning their next point, preparing their rebuttal. But that's not listening. That's just taking turns talking. True listening? That's something entirely different. It's when you set aside your own agenda, your own thoughts, your own need to be heard, and you create a space for someone else's truth to unfold. I remember working with a business leader who prided himself on being a great communicator. He could articulate his vision brilliantly, inspire with powerful speeches, command attention effortlessly, but his team didn't trust him. Why? Because he never truly listened. He heard words, but he missed meanings. He collected information, but he missed connections. Here's what I taught him, and what I want you to understand. Listening is not passive. It's the most active form of trust building we possess. When you truly listen to someone, you're saying, "You matter, your thoughts matter, your experience matters." And people can feel that. Learn to listen with your entire being. Watch their eyes, their body language, the subtle shifts in their tone. Listen for what's not being said, the fears behind the objections, the hopes behind the hesitation, the stories behind the statements. Don't interrupt. Don't jump to solutions. Don't relate everything back to your own experience. Just listen. Create a space where people feel safe to reveal their true thoughts, their real concerns, their authentic selves. And here's something crucial. Acknowledge what you hear. Not just with nods and mm-hms, but with genuine reflection of their meaning. What I'm hearing is, it sounds like. These simple phrases, when coupled with genuine attention, show people that they're not just being heard, they're being understood. The most profound trust is built in these moments of deep listening, because when someone feels truly heard, often for the first time, something magical happens. Walls come down, defenses lower. Real connection becomes possible. I've seen hardened skeptics become loyal allies, not through clever persuasion, but through the simple act of being deeply heard. I've watched decades-long conflicts dissolve when someone finally felt their truth was honored through authentic listening. So here's my challenge to you. In your next conversation, listen as if it's the most important thing you'll do today. Listen as if understanding this person is your only goal. Listen as if nothing else exists in that moment except their words, their meaning, their truth. Because here's what most people never realize. The greatest gift you can give another human being is your complete undivided attention. And in return, you'll receive something priceless, their trust. Make people feel important. Let me share with you the most profound truth I've learned in all my years of studying human nature. Every person you meet is hungry for one thing above all else, to feel important. Not artificially important, not temporarily important, but genuinely, deeply significant. I've watched rooms full of successful people, accomplished in every measurable way, light up like children when someone finally made them feel truly valued. Because you see, success doesn't satisfy this hunger, achievement doesn't fill this void. Only genuine appreciation and recognition can do that. Think about the last time someone made you feel truly important. Not just complimented, not just acknowledged, but deeply valued. Remember how that felt? Remember how your entire being responded to that recognition? That's the power we hold in our hands every day, the power to fulfill this fundamental human need. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think making others feel important means constant praise or elaborate compliments. They throw around superficial flattery like confetti, wondering why it doesn't stick. Let me tell you something. People can smell insincerity from a mile away. I remember working with a manager who couldn't understand why his team didn't trust him, despite his constant praise. "I tell them they're doing great work all the time," he said. But when I watched him interact with his team, I saw the truth. His compliments were automatic, his recognition generic. He was going through the motions without genuine interest or understanding. Real importance-making is an art. It requires genuine interest, careful observation, and sincere appreciation. It's not about grand gestures, it's about consistent, authentic recognition of what makes each person unique and valuable. Here's how you master this art. First, become a student of people. Notice the small things, the unique skills they bring, the particular way they solve problems, the special touch they add to their work. These observations are gold. When you point out something specific that you've noticed, you're saying, "I see you. I value what makes you unique." Second, recognize effort, not just results. Sometimes the person who tried the hardest didn't get the best outcome. But when you acknowledge their effort, their dedication, their persistence, You're saying your commitment matters, not just your success. Third, create opportunities for people to showcase their strengths. When you entrust someone with a task that plays to their unique abilities, you're saying, I believe in what you can do. This isn't just delegation, it's empowerment. Fourth, remember and reference what matters to them. When you follow up on something they mentioned in passing, when you remember their goals and aspirations, you're saying, your dreams are worth remembering. I once watched a CEO transform his entire company culture with this understanding. Instead of broad company-wide recognition, he started noticing individual contributions. He would walk the floors not to inspect, but to connect. He would ask questions, not to evaluate, but to understand. He remembered details about people's lives, their challenges, their aspirations. The result? Trust skyrocketed, loyalty deepened, productivity soared, not because he implemented new systems or policies, but because he made each person feel genuinely important. But here's the crucial thing to understand. This isn't a technique to be mastered. It's a mindset to be adopted. You must genuinely believe in the importance of each person you encounter. You must truly care about their value, their potential, their worth. Because people can tell the difference between someone who's trying to make them feel important and someone who truly believes that they are important. One builds temporary rapport, the other builds lasting trust. So I challenge you, look at the people in your life, your colleagues, your family, your friends, even strangers you meet. See their importance. Recognize their value. Show them in genuine ways that they matter. Remember, you hold in your hands the power to fulfill the deepest human hunger. Use it wisely, use it genuinely, and watch as trust blooms naturally in response. Lead with curiosity, not judgment. Let me tell you about a revelation that changed everything I understood about building trust. The moment you replace judgment with curiosity, people begin to open up like flowers to the sun. Most of us walk through life as critics, constantly evaluating, assessing, and judging everything and everyone we encounter. We think this makes us appear discerning, intelligent, sophisticated, but in reality, it builds walls between us and others faster than any other human habit. I remember working with a brilliant executive who couldn't understand why his team never brought him their real problems. I have more experience than any of them, he told me. I can spot their mistakes immediately. And there it was. The very reason his team kept him at arm's length. They didn't need a critic. They needed a curious ally. Think about the last time someone judged you. Remember how it felt? How you instantly became defensive, how your walls went up, how trust evaporated in that moment. Now think about it the last time someone was genuinely curious about your perspective, your experience, your reasoning. Remember how that felt? How you naturally opened up, how you felt safe to share, how trust began to grow? This is the power of leading with curiosity. When you approach people with genuine interest instead of predetermined judgments, you create a space where trust can flourish. But let me be clear, this isn't about asking random questions or playing at being interested. This is about developing genuine curiosity about the human being in front of you. It's about approaching each person as a fascinating book you've never read, a story you've yet to discover. Here's how you cultivate this mindset. First, recognize that everyone, yes, everyone, has something to teach you. The janitor might understand human nature better than the CEO. The intern might see solutions that the veteran has overlooked. When you truly believe this, your curiosity becomes genuine. Second, learn to ask questions that open doors rather than close them. Instead of, why did you do that? Ask, what led you to that decision? Instead of, don't you think that's risky? Ask, what opportunities do you see in this approach? Notice how different these questions feel. One set judges, the other explores. I once watched a manager transform a hostile team meeting simply by shifting from judgment to curiosity. Instead of criticizing a failed project, she asked, what did we learn from this? What insights did we gain? What would you do differently now? The energy in the room shifted dramatically. People who had been defensive became reflective. Those who had been silent began to share. Third, practice what I call curious listening. This means listening not just to understand, but to discover. When someone is speaking, instead of preparing your response or evaluation, let your mind wonder, what shaped this perspective? What experiences led here? What fears or hopes might be driving this? Fourth, be curious about disagreement. When someone sees things differently than you do, that's not a problem to solve. It's an opportunity to learn. Some of the most valuable insights I've gained came from people who completely disagreed with me. Once I became curious about their perspective instead of defensive about mine. Remember this, judgment creates distance, but curiosity creates connection. When you judge, you position yourself above others. When you're curious, you position yourself beside them as a fellow explorer in the complexity of human experience. This shift from judgment to curiosity must be genuine. People can tell the difference between real interest and polite pretense. When you're genuinely curious, your questions come from a place of wanting to understand, not from wanting to prove something or fix something. I've seen hardened relationships transform through this simple shift. I've watched long-standing conflicts dissolve when people became curious about each other's perspectives instead of defending their own positions. I've seen trust bloom in the most unlikely places, all because someone had the courage to set aside judgment and embrace curiosity. So here's my challenge to you. For the next week, catch yourself every time you move into judgment. Stop. Take a breath. Replace that judgment with curiosity. Ask questions that explore rather than evaluate. Listen to understand rather than to respond. Because here's the truth. Trust grows in the soil of understanding, and understanding grows in the garden of curiosity. Be the gardener, not the critic, and watch how people begin to trust you with their authentic selves. Earn respect through humility. Let me share a truth that took me years to understand. The most powerful people in any room are often the most humble. Not weak, mind you. Humble. There's a world of difference between the two. I've watched countless talented individuals sabotage their own success by trying to be the smartest person in the room. They interrupt conversations to correct minor details. They dismiss others' experiences because they know better. They treat every interaction as a chance to prove their superiority, and in doing so, they destroy any chance of earning genuine trust. You see, nobody, and I mean nobody, trusts a know-it-all. We might respect their knowledge, we might defer to their expertise, but we don't trust them with our authentic selves. Because how can you trust someone who's never wrong? How can you connect with someone who's never uncertain? How can you rely on someone who can't admit their limitations? I remember working with a brilliant surgeon who couldn't understand why his patients kept seeking second opinions despite his outstanding track record. "I'm the best in my field," he told me. "I've done this procedure thousands of times." But when I observed his patient consultations, I saw the problem. He didn't listen to their fears. He dismissed their questions as unnecessary. He treated their concerns as beneath his expertise. Then one day, something changed. A complicated case came in, one he wasn't entirely sure about. For the first time, he said to a patient, "I need to think about this. I want to consult with my colleagues before we proceed." He was terrified this admission would destroy their confidence in him. Instead, it did something remarkable. It deepened their trust. Why? Because humility isn't weakness, it's honest strength. It's the quiet confidence that doesn't need to boast, the secure expertise that can admit its limits, the genuine wisdom that remains eternally curious. Here's what true humility looks like in practice. First, embrace the power of "I don't know." These three words, when spoken with confidence, don't diminish your authority. They enhance it. They show that you value truth over appearance, accuracy over ego. Follow them with, "But I'll find out," and you demonstrate both humility and capability. Second, give credit generously and take blame readily. When things go well, shine the spotlight on others. When things go wrong, step into it yourself. This isn't about being a martyr, it's about showing that you value growth over glory. I once watched a CEO transform his company's culture through this practice. In success, he would meticulously detail every team member's contribution. In failure, he would stand up and say, "I made the final decision. I take full responsibility." The result? His team would walk through fire for him because they knew he had their backs. Third, treat every person as a potential teacher. The janitor might understand your building's dynamics better than anyone. The new intern might see problems from an angle you've never considered. When you approach each interaction with the mindset that you might learn something, you create an environment where trust can flourish. Fourth, share your journey, not just your achievements. Talk about your struggles, your doubts, your failures, not as self-deprecation, but as honest reflection. When people see that you've walked through fire and emerged wiser rather than bitter, they trust both your strength and your humanity. Remember this: true humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. It's the ability to stand securely in your own worth while making space for others to shine. It's the wisdom to know that no matter how much you know, there's always more to learn. I've seen hardened skeptics become loyal supporters, not because someone finally proved their worth to them, but because someone finally had the humility to connect with them as equals. I've watched decades of tension dissolve when someone had the courage to say, "You know what? You might be right about this." Here's something crucial to understand. Humility and authority aren't opposites. They're partners. The most powerful leaders I've ever met could command a room with a whisper, could inspire action with a question rather than a demand, could lead through curiosity rather than certainty. So I challenge you, next time you're tempted to prove your expertise, try proving your humanity instead. Next time you're about to correct someone, try understanding them first. Next time you're certain you're right, ask yourself what you might still have to learn. Because true trust isn't built on displays of knowledge, it's built on demonstrations of wisdom, and wisdom always walks hand in hand with humility. Vulnerability is strength. Let me tell you about the most counterintuitive secret to building trust I've ever discovered. The strongest connections are forged through vulnerability. Not weakness, mind you. Vulnerability. The courage to be seen as you truly are. Most people spend their lives building fortresses around themselves. They construct elaborate facades of perfection, competence, and unshakable confidence. They think these walls protect them, make them appear stronger, more trustworthy. But here's the paradox. These very walls prevent the deep connections they're trying to build. I remember working with a leader who prided himself on never showing emotion, never admitting uncertainty, never revealing any crack in his armor. His team respected him, certainly, but trust, that was another matter entirely. They didn't bring him their real problems. They didn't share their genuine concerns. They didn't risk being vulnerable with someone who never showed vulnerability himself. Then something unexpected happened. During a particularly challenging project, he did something unprecedented. He shared his own struggles with the team. He talked about his sleepless nights, his concerns about the direction they were taking, his uncertainty about some of the decisions they needed to make. He was terrified this would undermine his authority. Instead, it transformed his relationship with the team. Suddenly, real conversations started happening. Creative solutions emerged. Trust deepened. Why? Because vulnerability, when expressed with intention and authenticity, isn't weakness. It's the ultimate demonstration of strength. Think about the people you trust most deeply in your life. Are they the ones who maintain a perfect facade, or are they the ones who have shared their struggles, admitted their fears, shown you their authentic selves? We trust those who trust us enough to be real with us. But let me be clear, this isn't about emotional dumping or inappropriate oversharing. Strategic vulnerability is like a master key. It needs to be used wisely and in the right contexts. Here's how to practice it effectively. First, understand that vulnerability is a strength when it serves a purpose. Share your challenges not to offload them, but to create connection, to demonstrate understanding, to show others they're not alone in their struggles. Your vulnerability should build bridges, not create burdens. I once watched a senior executive transform a tense situation by simply saying, "You know what? I made a similar mistake early in my career. Here's what happened, and here's what I learned." In that moment, she wasn't diminishing her authority. She was enhancing it by showing her humanity. Second, practice what I call strategic authenticity. This means choosing deliberately what to share, when to share it, and why. Share experiences that others can learn from, struggles they might relate to, uncertainties they might also be feeling. Your vulnerability should illuminate paths forward, not just expose wounds. Third, remember that vulnerability isn't just about sharing difficulties. It's about showing your whole self. Share your enthusiasm when you're excited about something. Express genuine concern when you're worried. Let people see your authentic reactions, your real thoughts, your true feelings. Within professional boundaries, of course. Fourth, create safe spaces for others' vulnerability. When someone takes the risk of being real with you, honor that trust. Listen without judgment. Respond with understanding. Show them through your actions that their vulnerability is safe with you. I've seen entire organizational cultures transform through the power of strategic vulnerability. I've watched hardened teams become collaborative powerhouses when their leaders had the courage to be real. I've seen decades-old barriers between departments dissolve when someone finally had the courage to say, "We're struggling with this. Can you help us understand your perspective?" But here's something crucial to understand. Vulnerability without boundaries isn't leadership. It's therapy. Your vulnerability should always have a purpose, a direction, a goal of creating understanding or deepening connection. Remember this. People don't trust perfection because they know it isn't real. They trust authenticity because they recognize its courage. They trust vulnerability because they understand its strength. So I challenge you, what walls have you built that might be preventing deeper connections? What masks are you wearing that might be blocking trust? What strength might you demonstrate by showing your authentic self? Start small. Share a relevant challenge you've overcome. Admit when you're not sure about something. Ask for help when you need it. Show others that it's safe to be human in your presence. Because here's the truth. In a world of carefully curated images and polished performances, genuine vulnerability is not just refreshing, it's revolutionary. It's the foundation upon which real trust is built. Trust me on this. Your greatest strength lies not in appearing perfect, but in having the courage to be authentically, strategically, powerfully vulnerable. Consistency builds credibility. Let me share with you one of the most powerful truths about trust I've ever discovered. It's not built in moments of grandeur, but in the quiet consistency of daily actions. Trust isn't earned through occasional brilliance. It's earned through relentless reliability. I've watched countless charismatic leaders fail to build lasting trust despite their magnetic personalities and impressive speeches. Why? Because they were spectacular in the spotlight, but inconsistent in the shadows. They would make grand promises on Monday and forget them by Wednesday. They would proclaim one set of values in public and live by another in private. You see, people might be impressed by occasional excellence, but they trust consistent reliability. Think about it. Who do you trust more? The friend who shows up spectacularly once in a while, or the one who's there for you steadily and predictably, day after day? I remember working with a department manager who couldn't understand why his team's trust was eroding despite his best efforts. "I give them big bonuses when we hit our targets," he said. "I throw great celebration parties. I make inspiring speeches." But when I observed his daily interactions, I saw the problem. He was inconsistent in his mood, his expectations, his follow-through. His team never knew which version of him they would get, on any given day. Then there was another manager, quieter, less charismatic, whose team would walk through fire for her. Her secret? Absolute consistency. Her words matched her actions. Her promises were kept no matter how small. Her principles remained the same, whether dealing with the CEO or the newest intern. Here's what real consistency looks like in practice. First, understand that every interaction is a brick in the wall of trust. Every time you do what you say you'll do, you add a brick. Every time you don't, you remove several. Small promises matter just as much as big ones, sometimes more. When you say you'll send that email by end of day, send it. When you commit to a 5-minute chat, make it happen. These seemingly minor moments are the foundation of trust. Second, maintain emotional consistency. This doesn't mean being robotically unemotional. It means being predictably human. People should know that even if you're having a bad day, you won't take it out on them. They should trust that your core values and behaviors remain stable, regardless of circumstances. I once watched a CEO transform his company's culture simply by becoming more consistent. He started keeping a promise journal, writing down every commitment he made, no matter how small, and ensuring he followed through. Within months, the entire organization's dynamics began to shift. Why? Because people could finally rely on his word without reservation. Third, align your words, actions, and values. Consistency isn't just about doing what you say. It's about living what you believe. If you claim to value open communication, you need to consistently demonstrate that by being open to feedback, even when it's uncomfortable. If you preach work-life balance, you need to consistently respect your team's personal time, even when deadlines loom. Fourth, be consistent in your standards. Don't play favorites. Don't bend your principles for convenience. Don't have one set of rules for some people and another for others. Nothing erodes trust faster than inconsistent standards. Here's something crucial to understand. Consistency doesn't mean rigidity. You can be flexible in your methods while remaining consistent in your principles. You can adapt to circumstances while maintaining your core values. You can change your mind when presented with new information as long as you're consistent in your reasoning and transparent about your thought process. I've seen organizations transform when leaders embraced consistency. I've watched teams flourish when they could finally rely on stable expectations and dependable follow-through. I've seen relationships deepen when people realized they could count on each other's word day after day without question. Remember this, trust is like a garden. It doesn't grow through occasional heavy watering. It grows through consistent daily care. Every small action, every kept promise, every consistent behavior is like a drop of water helping that garden flourish. So I challenge you, start paying attention to your consistency. Are your daily actions aligned with your stated values? Do you follow through on small promises with the same dedication as big ones? Are you the same person in every room, or do you shift like a chameleon depending on your audience? Begin keeping track of your commitments, no matter how small. Notice your emotional patterns. Are you consistently reliable, or do people have to guess which version of you they'll encounter? Look for areas where your actions might not align with your words. Because here's the truth. People might be attracted to charisma, but they trust consistency. They might be impressed by occasional excellence, but they rely on steady dependability. They might enjoy unpredictability in entertainment, but they need consistency in relationships. Trust isn't built in grand gestures. It's built in small, consistent actions, repeated day after day until they become the foundation of who you are and how others see you. Speak to the heart. Let me share a fundamental truth about human connection that took me years to understand. People may nod at logic, but they move to emotion. You can stack facts like cordwood, present data, until you're blue in the face, but if you haven't touched the heart, you haven't built trust. I've watched brilliant people fail to gain trust despite their impeccable reasoning and flawless logic. Why? Because they spoke only to the mind, forgetting that trust lives in the heart. They presented arguments when they should have shared. Stories. They offered statistics when they should have connected with experiences. Think about the last time someone genuinely influenced your thinking or earned your trust. Was it through a PowerPoint full of bullet points? Or was it through a story that resonated with your own experience, a moment of genuine connection that made you feel understood? I remember working with a talented executive who couldn't understand why her team wasn't buying into her vision. Her presentations were perfect, clear objectives, solid data, compelling projections. But something was missing. The team understood her points but didn't feel her purpose. Then one day, instead of another slide deck, she shared a story. She talked about why this mission mattered to her personally, about the difference she hoped to make, about her own struggles and hopes along the way. Suddenly, the energy in the room shifted. People weren't just nodding, they were leaning in, connecting, engaging. Here's how you learn to speak to the heart. First, understand that emotion isn't the opposite of reason. It's the gateway to it. When people feel emotionally connected to an idea, they become more open to understanding. It's logic. When they feel emotionally safe with a person, they become more willing to consider their perspective. Second, learn the power of story. Human beings are wired for narrative. We've been sharing stories around campfires for millennia, and our brains still light up at the phrase, "Let me tell you about something that happened." A well-chosen story can convey more truth than a dozen arguments. I once watched a safety manager transform his company's compliance record not through more rules or stricter enforcement, but through stories. Instead of quoting statistics, he started sharing real experiences, what it felt like to tell someone's family about an accident, what it meant to keep everyone safe to go home to their loved ones. Compliance skyrocketed, not because people feared consequences, but because they connected emotionally with the purpose. Third, validate feelings before presenting solutions. When someone shares a concern or challenge, resist the urge to jump straight to problem solving. Take a moment to acknowledge their feelings, to show you understand not just their situation, but their emotional experience of it. Fourth, share your own emotional journey, not in a way that makes it about you, but in a way that creates bridges of understanding. When you're asking people to trust you through a challenging situation, share your own experiences with similar challenges. Let them see that you understand not just intellectually, but emotionally. Here's something crucial to understand. Speaking to the heart doesn't mean being manipulative or overly emotional. It means recognizing that human beings are emotional. Creatures who think, not thinking machines who feel. It means honoring the full spectrum of human experience in your communications. I've seen entire organizations transform when leaders learn to speak to the heart. I've watched long-standing conflicts dissolve when people started sharing stories instead of just arguments. I've seen trust bloom in the most unlikely places when someone had the courage to move beyond logic to genuine emotional connection. Remember this, trust isn't a transaction to be negotiated. It's a connection to be nurtured. And connections happen heart to heart, not just mind to mind. So I challenge you, in your next important conversation, pay attention to the emotional undercurrent, what fears might be driving resistance, what hopes might be fueling enthusiasm, what unspoken concerns might be blocking trust. Practice sharing stories that illuminate truth rather than just stating facts. Learn to recognize and speak to the emotional core of situations. Remember that every business decision, every professional interaction, every human choice has both logical and emotional components. Because here's the truth. When you learn to speak to the heart while honoring the mind, you unlock the full power of human connection. You create trust that goes beyond rational agreement to genuine emotional investment. The most powerful leaders I've ever known weren't just the smartest or the most logical. They were the ones who could touch hearts while engaging minds. They understood that trust flows through emotional channels even in the most professional settings. Master this balance, and you'll find that trust isn't something you have to chase. It's something that naturally grows in the fertile soil of genuine human connection. Connection before correction. Let me share with you one of the most powerful principles I've ever learned about building trust. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. Before you can correct, guide, or influence someone, you must first establish a genuine connection. I've watched countless well-meaning leaders, parents, and mentors fail to create positive change despite their expertise and good intentions. Why? Because they rushed to fix problems before building. Bridges. They offered solutions before establishing understanding. They tried to lead before learning to connect. Think about the last time someone tried to correct your behavior or thinking. If they started with criticism or immediate solutions, how did you feel? Now think about someone who first took the time to understand your perspective, to acknowledge your efforts, to connect with your experience. Which approach made you more open to change? I remember working with a brilliant manager who couldn't understand why his feedback never seemed to stick. His insights were sharp, his solutions were sound, but his team seemed resistant to his guidance. When I observed his interactions, I saw the problem immediately. He would dive straight into corrections without first establishing connection. Then something remarkable happened. During a particularly challenging project review, instead of beginning with what went wrong, he started by asking questions. What challenges did you face? What support did you need? What did you learn from this experience? The entire dynamic shifted. His team opened up, shared real insights, and became receptive to his guidance. Here's how to master the art of connection before correction. First, understand that trust is the bridge that carries correction. Without that bridge, even the most valuable feedback will fall into the chasm of resistance. People don't reject advice because it's wrong. They reject it because they don't feel connected to the person giving it. Second, learn to lead with curiosity instead of judgment. Before you offer solutions, seek to understand the full picture. Ask questions that show genuine interest in the other person's experience, perspective, and reasoning. When people feel understood, they become open to understanding. I once watched a senior executive transform a struggling department not through new policies or procedures, but through connection. Instead of immediately implementing changes, she spent her first month having coffee with team members, learning about their challenges, understanding their frustrations, and acknowledging their efforts. By the time she started making changes, she had built such strong connections that her team was eager to follow her lead. Third, practice what I call empathy before expertise. Even if you can see the solution immediately, take time to understand and acknowledge the emotional experience of the person facing the challenge. Remember, people don't just want their problems solved. They want their experiences validated. Fourth, create safety before suggesting change. Help people understand that your goal isn't to judge them, but to support their growth. Make it clear, through your words and actions, that mistakes are opportunities for learning, not occasions for criticism. Here's something crucial to understand. Connection isn't just about being nice, it's about being genuine. People can tell the difference between authentic interest and procedural politeness. Real connection happens when you truly care about understanding their perspective, not just getting them to see yours. I've seen entire teams transform when leaders embraced this principle. I've watched resistant employees become eager learners when they felt genuinely understood. I've seen struggling relationships rebuild themselves when people learn to connect before trying to correct. Remember this, every correction is a request for change, and change requires trust. Trust flows through connection. Without that foundation, even the most valuable feedback will feel like an attack rather than assistance. So I challenge you, before your next feedback session, coaching, conversation, or moment of correction, pause. Ask yourself, have I established a genuine connection? Does this person feel understood? Have I created a foundation of trust strong enough to support the weight of change? Start practicing small. When someone makes a mistake, resist the urge to immediately point it out. Instead, ask about their process, their challenges, their thinking. When you need to give feedback, begin by acknowledging efforts and understanding. Obstacles. When you see something that needs to change, first validate the experience of the person who needs to make that change. Because here's the truth. The most powerful influence doesn't come from authority or expertise. It comes from connection. People don't change because they're told to. They change because they trust the person guiding them toward that change. The most effective leaders I've ever known weren't just experts in their field. They were masters of human connection. They understood that before you can lead someone to a new perspective, you must first meet them where they are. Master this principle, and you'll find that correction becomes less about pushing against resistance and more about guiding willing partners toward growth, because when connection comes before correction, trust naturally follows. Keep your word every time. Let me share with you the most fundamental principle of trust building I've ever encountered. Your word must be your bond, not just sometimes, not just when it's convenient, but every single time. Nothing destroys trust faster than broken promises, and nothing builds it more surely than kept ones. I've watched careers crumble and relationships dissolve not through major betrayals, but through the slow erosion of trust caused by small promises, carelessly made and casually broken. The meeting that was supposed to last 15 minutes but stretched to an hour. The email that was promised by end of day but arrived 3 days later. The small commitment that was forgotten because it seemed unimportant. You see, people don't just track the big promises. They notice every single time you say you'll do something. Each promise, no matter how small, is a contract of trust. Each time you keep your word, you build credibility. Each time you break it, you create doubt. I remember working with an executive who couldn't understand why his team seemed increasingly skeptical of his leadership, despite his grand vision and ambitious goals. When I observed his daily interactions, the problem became clear. He treated his words as casual suggestions rather than binding commitments. "I'll get back to you today" meant sometime this week. "We'll definitely consider that" meant it would be forgotten by tomorrow. Then there was another leader, less charismatic, less visionary, whose team would follow her anywhere. Her secret? Absolute reliability. If she said she would do something, it was as good as done. No excuses, no explanations needed, because her track record spoke for itself. Here's how to make your word your bond. First, treat every commitment as sacred, no matter how small. Before you say, "I'll do that," pause and ask yourself, am I absolutely certain I can and will follow through? If there's any doubt, don't make the promise. It's better to say, "I'll check my schedule and get back to you," than to make a commitment you might not keep. Second, understand that explanations don't rebuild broken trust. Yes, sometimes circumstances genuinely prevent us from keeping our word. But if this happens often, the problem isn't the circumstances, it's our relationship with commitment. People would rather hear an honest no up front than a string of explanations later. I once watched a manager transform her department's entire culture simply by becoming obsessive about keeping her word. She started carrying a small notebook, writing down every commitment she made, no matter how minor. Her team noticed. Within months, they began emulating her practice. Soon, the entire department became known for its reliability. Third, be precise with your commitments. Instead of, "I'll get that to you soon," say, "I'll send that by 3 p.m. tomorrow." Instead of, "We'll look into that," say, "I'll review this and give you an answer by Friday." Specific commitments create clear accountability. Fourth, when you can't keep your word, communicate proactively. If you realize you won't make a deadline, don't wait for the other person to follow up. Reach out immediately, take responsibility, and propose a new commitment. Then keep that one without fail. Here's something crucial to understand. Keeping your word isn't just about task completion, it's about character demonstration. Every kept promise says, "You can count on me." Every broken one says, your trust was misplaced. I've seen entire organizations transform when leaders started taking their words seriously. I've watched skeptical teams become passionate supporters when they realized their leader's word was genuinely reliable. I've seen struggling relationships rebuild themselves when people recommitted to keeping even their smallest promises. Remember this, trust isn't built through grand declarations, but through consistent demonstration. Your word is either your bond or it isn't. There's no middle ground. So I challenge you, for the next week, treat every word that leaves your mouth as a sacred contract. Before you say, I will, ask yourself, am I certain? Before you make a commitment, ask yourself, is this absolutely within my power to deliver? Start keeping track of every promise you make, no matter how small. Notice how often you say things like, I'll get back to you, or I'll take care of that. Then notice how often you actually follow through exactly as promised. Because here's the truth. In a world where words are often treated as casual currency, someone whose word is their bond becomes invaluable. They stand out, not through grand promises, but through quiet reliability. The most trusted people I've ever known weren't the most talented or the most charismatic. They were the ones whose words and actions aligned so consistently that their promises didn't need guarantees. They said it, so you knew it would happen. Master this principle, and you'll find that trust isn't something you have to pursue. It's something that naturally follows in the wake of your unwavering reliability. Disarm with empathy. Let me share with you one of the most powerful secrets I've learned about building trust. When tension rises, when defenses go up, when conflict seems inevitable, that's when empathy becomes your most powerful tool. Not argument, not logic, not force of will, but genuine understanding. I've watched countless conflicts escalate not because people disagreed too deeply, but because they stopped trying to understand each other. They became so focused on being right that they forgot to be understanding. They tried to win arguments when they should have been building bridges. Think about the last time you faced strong opposition or resistance. What was your instinct? To push harder? To argue more forcefully? To prove your point more decisively? Now think about what might have happened if you had paused instead and tried to truly understand the other person's perspective. I remember working with two department heads who were locked in what seemed like an endless conflict. Each was convinced the other was deliberately undermining their efforts. Each had notebooks full of evidence proving they were right. Each wanted me to tell the other they were wrong. Instead, I asked them both to do something different, to spend one conversation focusing solely on understanding each other's challenges, fears, and pressures without trying to solve anything. The transformation was remarkable. As they began to understand the pressures each other faced, their defenses naturally lowered. Solutions that had seemed impossible suddenly became obvious. Here's how to master the art of disarming with empathy. First, understand that empathy isn't agreement, it's understanding. You can completely disagree with someone's position while still genuinely understanding how they arrived at it. This distinction is crucial. People often resist showing empathy because they think it means endorsing the other person's view. It doesn't. Second, learn to listen for feelings beneath facts. When someone is angry about a late report, they might really be afraid of looking bad to their boss. When someone resists a change, they might really be worried about their ability to adapt. When you address the underlying emotion, the surface issue often resolves itself. I once watched a CEO transform a hostile union negotiation, not through better offers or tougher stance, but through genuine empathy. Instead of starting with proposals, he began by asking about the workers' daily challenges, their fears, their hopes. The entire dynamic of the negotiation shifted because people felt genuinely understood. Third, practice what I call active empathy. This means not just passively receiving information, but actively trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Ask yourself, if I had their experiences, their pressures, their responsibilities, might I feel the same way? Fourth, Demonstrate understanding before offering solutions. Use phrases like, "I can see why you'd feel that way," or "That must be incredibly frustrating." Show people that you're not just waiting for your turn to speak, you're really trying to understand their experience. Here's something crucial to understand. Empathy isn't just a nice-to-have soft skill. It's a powerful tool for transformation. When people feel genuinely understood, their defenses naturally lower. When defenses lower, real dialogue becomes possible. When real dialogue happens, trust can grow. I've seen decades-long conflicts resolve when someone finally had the courage to stop arguing and start understanding. I've watched hostile relationships transform when people learn to lead with empathy instead of judgment. I've seen seemingly impossible situations unlock when someone took the time to truly understand all perspectives involved. Remember this: in any situation of conflict or resistance, someone has to be the first to lower their defenses. Someone has to be the first to extend understanding. Someone has to be the first to show empathy. Why not let that someone be you? So, I challenge you. In your next difficult conversation, resist the urge to argue or defend. Instead, make it your sole goal to understand the other person's perspective completely. Ask questions not to prove them wrong, but to genuinely understand their view. Start practicing in small ways. When someone expresses frustration, resist the urge to immediately offer solutions. Instead, try to understand and articulate their experience. When you face resistance, pause before pushing back. Ask yourself, what might make a reasonable person take this position? Because here's the truth. The most powerful way to disarm opposition isn't through superior arguments, it's through genuine understanding. When people feel understood, they become more willing to understand. When they feel heard, they become more willing to listen. The most influential leaders I've ever known weren't the ones with the most compelling arguments. They were the ones with the greatest capacity for empathy. They knew that trust isn't built through winning debates, but through building understanding. Master this principle, and you'll find that conflict becomes less about winning and losing, and more about understanding and growing. Because when you lead with empathy, trust naturally follows. Remember, empathy isn't weakness, it's the ultimate strength. It's the power to transform conflicts into connections, resistance into collaboration, and mistrust into deep, lasting trust. Be interested, not interesting. Let me share with you a profound truth that took me years to understand. People trust those who are interested in them far more than those who try to be interesting. The most magnetic quality you can develop isn't wit or charm or impressive knowledge. It's genuine curiosity about others. I've watched countless people exhaust themselves trying to be the most interesting person in the room. They collect impressive stories, memorize clever jokes, perfect their delivery of witty remarks, and while they might attract attention, they rarely build genuine trust. Why? Because trust isn't built on performance, it's built on connection. Think about the people you trust most deeply. Are they the ones who always have the most impressive stories? Or are they the ones who show genuine interest in your stories? Are they the ones who speak the most brilliantly, or the ones who listen most sincerely? I remember working with a sales executive who couldn't understand why his numbers were falling despite his extensive product knowledge and polished presentation skills. When I observed his client meetings, I saw the problem immediately. He was so focused on being interesting that he never became interested. He would talk at length about features and benefits, but rarely asked about his clients' specific needs and challenges. Then, something transformed his approach. After one particularly frustrating meeting, he decided to try an experiment. He would ask 3 questions for every statement he made. The results were remarkable. Not only did his sales improve, but his client relationships deepened. Why? Because he stopped trying to impress and started trying to understand. Here's how to master the art of being interested. First, understand. That curiosity is a skill you can develop. Just as you can train yourself to speak well, you can train yourself to listen well. Start by making it your goal to learn one new thing about each person you meet. Not just surface facts, but genuine insights into their experiences, perspectives, and values. Second, practice what I call deep listening. This means listening not just to gather information, but to truly understand. When someone speaks, don't. Just wait for your turn. Try to understand their perspective, their reasoning, their emotions. Ask follow-up questions that show you're genuinely engaged with their thoughts. I once watched a new manager transform a struggling team not through brilliant leadership strategies, but through genuine interest. She spent her first month asking questions, learning about each team member's challenges, aspirations, and ideas. By the time she started implementing changes, she had built such strong connections that her team was eager to follow her lead. Third, learn to ask better questions. Instead of "How are you?" which usually gets a superficial response, ask, "What's been the most interesting part of your week?" Instead of "Do you like your job?" ask, "What aspects of your work do you find most meaningful?" Questions that invite reflection tend to create deeper connections. Fourth, practice what I call interest without agenda. Too often, we show interest only when we want something. But people can sense when your curiosity is genuine versus when it's tactical. Make it your goal to learn about others simply because every human being has something valuable to teach us. Here's something crucial to understand. Being interested isn't about being passive or simply nodding along. It's about active engagement with another person's reality. It's about showing them that their thoughts, experiences, and perspectives matter to you. I've seen entire relationships transform when people shifted from trying to be interesting to becoming genuinely interested. I've watched longtime adversaries become allies when someone finally showed sincere curiosity about the other's perspective. I've seen struggling teams become high-performing units when leaders started showing genuine interest in their team members' ideas and concerns. Remember this: everyone you meet knows something you don't. Everyone has experiences you can learn, from perspectives that could enrich your understanding, insights that could broaden your view of the world. So I challenge you, in your next conversation, make it your goal not to impress, but to learn. Count how many times you ask questions versus how many times you make statements. Pay attention to whether you're listening to understand or just waiting to respond. Start practicing small. When someone shares something, resist the urge to relate it back to your own experience. Instead, ask a question that helps you understand their experience better. When you meet someone new, make it your goal to learn something unexpected about them. Because here's the truth. In a world where everyone is trying to be interesting, being genuinely interested makes you stand out. In a world of broadcasters, be a receiver. In a world of speakers, be a listener. The most trusted people I've ever known weren't the ones with the most impressive achievements or the most compelling stories. They were the ones who showed genuine interest in others' achievements and stories. Master this principle, and you'll find that trust isn't something you have to chase. It's something that naturally develops when people feel truly seen, heard, and understood. Handle criticism with grace. Let me share with you one of the most revealing moments in any relationship: how someone handles criticism. Nothing tests trust more thoroughly, and nothing builds it more powerfully than responding to criticism with genuine grace and openness. I've watched countless relationships, professional and personal, crumble not because of the criticism itself, but because of how people responded to it. They became defensive, attacked back, or withdrew completely. In doing so, they destroyed the very trust they were trying to protect. Think about the last time you received criticism. What was your first reaction? Did you feel your defenses rise? Did you immediately start preparing your counter-arguments? Did you feel the instinctive need to explain, justify, or defend? Now think about how that reaction affected the relationship with the person offering the feedback. I remember working with a brilliant executive who couldn't understand why her team seemed increasingly hesitant to share honest feedback with her. When I observed her interactions, the reason became clear. Although she claimed to want feedback, her reactions made people regret giving it. She would immediately explain why they were wrong, justify her actions, or subtly dismiss their concerns. Then something remarkable happened. After a particularly difficult project failure, instead of defending herself, she did something unexpected. She thanked her team for their honest feedback, acknowledged their frustrations, and asked for specific examples of how she could improve. The entire dynamic of the team shifted in that moment. Here's how to master the art of handling criticism with grace. First, understand that criticism is often a gift wrapped in rough paper. When someone takes the risk to offer you feedback, they're investing in your relationship. They believe you're capable of growth, and they care enough to help you see potential blind spots. Even if their delivery is imperfect, their intention is often positive. Second, practice what I call the pause and appreciate technique. When criticism comes, pause before responding. Take a breath, then thank the person for caring enough to share their perspective. This simple practice can transform a potentially defensive moment into an opportunity for connection. I once watched a senior leader transform his organization's entire feedback culture through this approach. Instead of defending against criticism, he started responding with genuine curiosity and appreciation. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Could you tell me more about what you've observed?" His team noticed, and gradually the entire organization became more open to giving and receiving feedback. Third, learn to separate the message from the messenger. Sometimes feedback comes wrapped in emotion, delivered imperfectly, or from someone you find challenging. Focus on what you can learn from the criticism rather than getting caught up in how it was delivered or who delivered it. Fourth, practice what I call feedback judo, using the energy of criticism to fuel your growth rather than fighting against it. When someone points out a flaw or mistake, instead of resisting, lean into it. Ask questions, seek examples. Show them that their feedback isn't falling into a defensive void but landing on fertile ground. Here's something crucial to understand. How you handle criticism doesn't just affect the current moment, it shapes all future interactions. When you respond to feedback with grace, you create an environment where honest communication can flourish. When you respond defensively, you teach people to keep their concerns to themselves. I've seen entire organizational cultures transform when leaders learn to handle criticism gracefully. I've watched team dynamics shift from guarded to open when managers started responding to feedback with genuine appreciation. I've seen struggling relationships rebuild themselves when people learn to receive criticism as an opportunity rather than an attack. Remember this, the way you handle criticism is a direct demonstration of your self-confidence and emotional maturity. Defensive responses suggest insecurity. Graceful responses demonstrate strength. So I challenge you. For the next week, make it your goal to receive all feedback, positive or negative, with genuine appreciation and curiosity. When criticism comes, resist the urge to defend or explain. Instead, listen fully, think sincerely, and ask questions that help you understand more deeply. Start practicing in small ways. When someone points out a mistake, thank them for bringing it to your attention. When you receive constructive feedback, ask for specific examples to help you understand better. When criticism stings, remind yourself that discomfort often precedes growth. Because here's the truth, the most trusted people aren't those who never make mistakes. They're those who handle the acknowledgement of their mistakes with grace. They're not perfect, but they're perfectly open to growing. The most respected leaders I've ever known weren't the ones who were never criticized. They were the ones who handled criticism with such grace that people felt safe being honest with them. They understood that trust grows not in the absence of criticism, but in how we handle it when it comes. Master this principle, and you'll find that criticism becomes less about judgment and more about growth. Because when you handle feedback with grace, you transform potential moments of conflict into opportunities for deeper trust. Remember, your response to criticism isn't just about managing the current moment, it's about building the kind of relationships where truth can be spoken and trust can flourish. Let others win. Let me share with you one of the most counterintuitive secrets of building trust. Sometimes the fastest way to win is to let others win. Not in a manipulative way, not as a strategy, but as a genuine recognition that life isn't a zero-sum game and relationships matter more than being right. I've watched countless relationships deteriorate not because people were wrong, but because they were too focused on being right. They won the argument but lost the relationship. They proved their point but destroyed trust in the process. They achieved victory but created lasting resentment. Think about the last time you won an argument completely. How did it feel in the moment? Now, how did it affect your relationship with the other person? Did your victory strengthen trust? Or did it create a subtle barrier? Did it bring you closer? Or did it push you further apart? I remember working with two brilliant executives who were locked in an endless cycle of proving each other wrong. Each was highly competent, each had valid points, and each was absolutely determined to win every interaction. The result? Their entire department was suffering because they couldn't collaborate effectively. Then something transformed their dynamic. During one particularly heated discussion, one of them did something unexpected. Instead of pressing his point, he paused and said, "You know what? You might be right about this. Let's try your approach." The impact was immediate and profound. Not only did it defuse the tension, but it also created space for real collaboration. Here's how to master the art of letting others win. First, understand that letting others win isn't about being weak. It's about being wise. It's recognizing that relationships are more valuable than individual victories. It's understanding that trust builds stronger futures than temporary triumphs. Second, practice what I call victory through surrender. When you sense an interaction becoming competitive, ask yourself, what matters more here, winning this point or building this relationship? Sometimes consciously choosing to let the other person win creates the foundation for much greater shared success. I once watched a senior leader transform a hostile team environment not through assertion of authority, but through deliberate stepping back. Instead of pushing his ideas, he started actively highlighting and implementing others' suggestions. Within months, his team became one of the most collaborative and innovative in the company. Third, learn to find wins for others, even in disagreement. When you can't agree with someone's entire position, look for elements you can support. Acknowledge their valid points. Celebrate their good insights. Show them that you're not opposed to them, even if you see things differently. Fourth, practice what I call preemptive appreciation. Before disagreement can escalate, actively look for opportunities to showcase others' contributions. When you consistently demonstrate that you want others to succeed, they stop seeing interactions with you as competitions to win. Here's something crucial to understand. Letting others win isn't about being a doormat or sacrificing your principles. It's about recognizing that most situations offer opportunities for everyone to win if we're willing to look for them. I've seen entire organizational cultures transform when leaders learn to prioritize shared success over individual victory. I've watched long-standing conflicts dissolve when someone had the courage to say, "You know what? Your way might be better." I've seen struggling teams become high-performing units when their members stopped competing and started collaborating. Remember this, every time you let someone else win, you win something more valuable, trust. Every time you step back to let someone else shine, you build something more lasting than victory, relationship. So I challenge you. For the next week, look for opportunities to let others win. When someone suggests an idea different from yours, resist the urge to improve or correct it. Instead, look for ways to support and enhance their suggestion. Start practicing in small ways. When someone offers a different approach, try saying, "That's an interesting perspective. Let's explore that." When you're tempted to prove someone wrong, ask yourself if being right in this moment is worth the potential cost to the relationship. Because here's the truth. In the long game of life and leadership, the biggest winners aren't those who win every battle. They're those who build the strongest relationships. They're not the ones who prove themselves right most often, but those who make others feel valued and heard. The most trusted leaders I've ever known weren't the ones who won every argument. They were the ones who made everyone around them feel like winners. They understood that true victory isn't about dominating others. It's about elevating them. Master this principle, and you'll find that success becomes less about personal triumph and more about collective achievement. Because when you let others win, everyone ultimately wins through stronger relationships and deeper trust. Remember, every interaction is a choice between being right and being effective. Choose wisely and watch how letting others win transforms your relationships and your life. Build bridges, not walls. Let me share with you one of the most powerful principles of building trust I've ever discovered. In a world that's increasingly divided, those who build bridges rather than walls become the most trusted leaders of all. The ability to connect different people, ideas, and perspectives isn't just a skill, it's a superpower. I've watched countless organizations and relationships suffer not from lack of talent or resources, but from the invisible walls people build between themselves. Departments that won't collaborate, teams that won't communicate, individuals who won't reach across divides. And in every case, trust erodes in the spaces between these walls. Think about the most effective leaders you've known. Were they the ones who created exclusive inner circles? Or were they the ones who could bring different types of people together, who could help opposing viewpoints find common ground, who could build connections across divides? I remember working with a company that was struggling with deep divisions between their old guard and their newer employees. Each group had built walls of assumptions about the other. The veterans saw the newcomers as disrespectful of tradition. The newcomers saw the veterans as resistant to necessary change. Then something remarkable happened. A middle manager started organizing what she called bridge meetings, informal gatherings where she deliberately mixed people from both groups and facilitated discussions about their shared hopes for the company's future. The transformation was profound. As people shared their stories and perspectives, the walls began to crumble. Here's how to master the art of bridge building. First, understand that bridges don't build themselves. They require intentional effort. You must actively look for opportunities to connect people, ideas, and groups that might not naturally come together. This isn't about forcing connections. It's about creating opportunities for natural connections to form. Second, practice what I call inclusive leadership. This means deliberately seeking out and valuing different perspectives, experiences, and approaches. It means making sure every voice has a chance to be heard, not just the loudest or most familiar ones. I once watched a department head transform her organization's culture not through grand initiatives, but through simple bridge-building practices. She started every project by asking, "Who else should be part of this conversation?" She made it a habit to connect people whose work complemented each other. She created spaces where different perspectives could safely be shared. Third, learn to be a translator between different groups. Every department, every generation, every specialty has its own language and way of seeing things. Bridge builders learn to speak multiple languages and help different groups understand each other's perspectives. Fourth, practice what I call active inclusion. This means not just leaving the door open, but actively inviting people in. It means reaching out to those who might feel marginalized, seeking input from those who might not naturally speak up, creating spaces where everyone feels welcomed and valued. Here's something crucial to understand. Bridge building isn't about eliminating differences. It's about creating connections despite them. It's not about making everyone the same, it's about helping different people work together effectively. I've seen entire organizations transform when leaders focused on building bridges instead of maintaining walls. I've watched long-standing conflicts dissolve when someone had the courage to reach across divides. I've seen struggling teams become powerhouses when they learn to value and connect their differences rather than letting them create distance. Remember this: every wall in an organization or relationship represents lost potential. Every bridge you build multiplies possibilities and strengthens trust. So I challenge you. Look around your sphere of influence. Where do you see walls that need bridges? What groups or individuals could benefit from connection? What divisions might be healed through intentional bridge building? Start practicing in small ways. When you hear people from one department criticizing another, become curious about the other side's perspective. When you notice someone feeling left out, actively reach out and include them. When you see different viewpoints clashing, look for the common ground beneath the conflict. Because here's the truth. In a world that often seems to reward division, bridge builders become invaluable. They're the ones who can help organizations navigate change, help teams maximize their diverse potential, help relationships grow stronger through difference rather than in spite of it. The most trusted leaders I've ever known weren't the ones who created the strongest walls around their territory. They were the ones who built the most bridges to others. They understood that trust grows not in isolated gardens, but in connected networks of relationships. Master this principle, and you'll find that your influence grows not through building walls to protect your position, but through building bridges that create new possibilities. Because when you become known as a bridge builder, people naturally trust you to help them connect with others, with opportunities, with potential they might not have seen otherwise. Remember, every interaction is an opportunity to either build a wall or build a bridge. Choose bridges and watch how trust naturally flows across them. Silence speaks volumes. Let me share with you one of the most overlooked secrets of building trust: the power of strategic silence. In a world that celebrates constant communication, those who master the art of silence often build the deepest trust of all. I've watched countless people undermine their own trustworthiness, not through what they said wrong, but through what they didn't need to say at all. They fill every silence with words, react to every statement with a response, rush to fill every quiet moment with sound. In doing so, they miss the profound power of purposeful silence. Think about the most trustworthy people you know. Are they the ones who always have something to say? Or are they the ones who know when to simply listen, when to let silence do the work, when to give space for thoughts to breathe and feelings to settle? I remember working with a negotiator who couldn't understand why his deals often fell through at the last moment. When I observed his interactions, the problem became clear. He never gave silence a chance to work. Every pause was filled with another argument, every moment of hesitation met with more persuasion, every quiet second stuffed with words. Then something transformed his approach. After a particularly frustrating failed negotiation, he decided to experiment with silence. In his next meeting, when he made his proposal, he simply stated it clearly, and then stayed quiet. The transformation was remarkable. In the silence, the other party had space to think, to consider, to arrive at their own conclusions. Here's how to master the art of strategic silence. First, understand that silence isn't empty. It's full of potential. It's the space where thoughts crystallize, where emotions settle, where insights emerge. When you rush to fill silence, you rob others of these valuable moments of processing and reflection. Second, practice what I call comfortable silence. This means being at ease with quiet moments in conversation, recognizing them not as awkward gaps to be filled, but as natural spaces for thought and feeling to develop. I once watched a CEO transform her leadership style not by learning to speak more effectively, but by learning to use silence more strategically. In meetings, after asking an important question, She would wait, really wait, for answers. The quality of discussion in her meetings dramatically improved because people had time to think deeply before speaking. Third, learn to recognize the different types of silence. There's the silence of reflection, which needs to be honored. There's the silence of resistance, which needs to be understood. There's the silence of confusion, which needs clarification. Each type calls for a different response, or sometimes no response at all. Fourth, practice what I call silence leadership. This means using your silence to create space for others to step forward, to think deeply, to find their voice. Sometimes, the most powerful thing a leader can do is simply be quietly present while others work through their thoughts. Here's something crucial to understand. Strategic silence isn't about being passive or uninvolved. It's about recognizing that sometimes the absence of words can communicate more effectively than their presence. I've seen entire negotiations turn around when someone had the courage to let silence do the work. I've watched team dynamics transform. When leaders learn to create space rather than fill it, I've seen struggling relationships rebuild themselves when people learn to value silence as much as speech. Remember this: every word you speak should improve upon silence. If it doesn't, silence might be the better choice. So I challenge you. For the next week, practice intentional silence. When someone makes a proposal, resist the urge to respond immediately. When a difficult question is asked, give yourself and others time to think. When emotion fills a room, let silence help it settle. Start practicing in small ways. Count to 5 in your head before responding to important statements. Notice how often you speak just to fill silence rather than to add value. Pay attention to how others respond when you give them more space to think and process. Because here's the truth. In a world of constant noise, those who master silence stand out. They build trust not just through what they say, but through what they don't say. They understand that trust often grows best in the quiet spaces between words. The most trusted leaders I've ever known weren't necessarily the most articulate or the most charismatic. They were the ones who knew when to let silence speak. They understood that sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Master this principle, and you'll find that your words carry more weight because they're chosen more carefully. You'll discover that silence isn't just the absence of speech. It's a powerful tool for building trust and understanding. Remember, every moment of silence is an opportunity to listen more deeply, to think more clearly, to connect more authentically. Use these moments wisely and watch how trust grows in the quiet spaces you create. Walk with integrity, even unseen. Let me share with you the most fundamental truth about building lasting trust. Your character is defined not by what you do when everyone is watching, but by who you are when no one sees you at all. Integrity isn't a public performance. It's a private commitment. I've watched countless careers and relationships crumble not through public failures, but through the slow erosion of private integrity. People who were exemplary in the spotlight, but careless in the shadows. Leaders who preached values in meetings, but violated them in moments they thought nobody would notice. Think about the people you trust most deeply. Are they the ones who simply maintain a spotless public image? Or are they the ones you know would do the right thing, even if no one ever found out? The ones whose private character matches their public reputation. I remember working with a respected executive whose team's trust suddenly collapsed. The trigger wasn't a major scandal. It was the accidental discovery that he had been taking credit for his team's ideas in meetings with senior leadership. Small acts, done in moments he thought would remain private, ultimately destroyed years of carefully built trust. Then there was another leader, less prominent, less polished, whose team would follow her anywhere. Her secret: absolute consistency between her public and private behavior. She lived her values not because someone was watching, but because that's who she was. Here's how to master the art of unwavering integrity. First, understand that integrity isn't about perfection. It's about consistency. It's about being the same person in every situation, maintaining the same standards, whether anyone will know or not. It's about doing the right thing not because it will be seen, but because it's right. Second, practice what I call private victories. These are the moments when you choose to maintain your standards even when it would be easier not to, even when no one would ever know if you didn't. Each of these choices builds your character stronger. I once watched a manager transform her department's entire culture not through new policies or procedures, but through consistent demonstration of private integrity. She would give credit to absent team members for their ideas. She would defend those who weren't in the room to defend themselves. She would maintain her commitments even when no one would notice if she didn't. Third, learn to audit your private behavior. Regularly ask yourself, would I be comfortable if everyone could see how I handle these private moments? Would I be proud if my private choices were made public? Would I want others to follow my example in these unseen decisions? Fourth, practice what I call integrity in the margins. These are the small moments that seem insignificant, taking credit for a minor idea, cutting a small corner, letting a small untruth pass. Remember that character isn't built or broken in dramatic moments. It's shaped in these countless small choices. Here's something crucial to understand. Integrity isn't about maintaining appearances. It's about building a character so solid that appearances take care of themselves. It's about becoming someone who doesn't need to remember to do the right thing, because doing the right thing has become natural. I've seen entire organizations transform when leaders started prioritizing private integrity over public image. I've watched struggling teams become high-performing units when their members realized they could trust each other, even in unseen moments. I've seen relationships rebuild themselves when people committed to being trustworthy, even when no one was looking. Remember this: trust isn't built on grand public gestures. It's built on countless private moments of choosing right over easy, principles over convenience, truth over advantage. So I challenge you. For the next week, pay attention to your private moments. Notice the small choices you make when no one is watching. Observe how you handle situations where you could take advantage and no one would know. Start practicing in small ways. Give credit even when you could easily take it. Maintain standards even when no one would notice if you didn't. Keep commitments even when breaking them would be more convenient and no one would find out. Because here's the truth. In a world where public image often seems to matter more than private character, those who maintain their integrity even in unseen moments become invaluable. They build a kind of trust that no public relations campaign can match. The most trusted people I've ever known weren't the ones who were most careful about their public image. They were the ones whose private character was so solid that they never had to worry about their image at all. They understood that trust isn't about seeming trustworthy. It's about being trustworthy through and through. Master this principle, and you'll find that trust isn't something you have to pursue. It's something that naturally flows from who you've become. Because when your character is solid even in private moments, your public trustworthiness becomes effortless. Remember, every private moment is a chance to strengthen or weaken your character. Choose strength. Choose integrity. Choose to be someone worthy of trust, even when no one will ever know. Become someone worth trusting. Let me share with you the ultimate truth about building trust. In the end, it's not about techniques or strategies or methods. It's about becoming someone who is genuinely worthy of trust. Because trust isn't something you get, it's something you earn by who you choose to become. I've watched countless people try to shortcut this fundamental truth. They study influence tactics, practice communication techniques, master the external appearances of trustworthiness. But true trust, deep, lasting, unwavering trust, comes only when these external skills are matched by internal character. Think about the people you trust most deeply in your life. Is your trust in them based on their techniques and strategies, or is it based on who they are, consistently and authentically, day after day? Is it about what they do or about who they've become? I remember working with an ambitious young leader who was frustrated by his inability to build deep trust with his team despite mastering all the right leadership behaviors. He did everything the book suggested. He listened actively, showed empathy, practiced open communication. But something was missing. Then something transformed his approach. After a particularly honest feedback session, he realized that all his perfect behaviors were just that, behaviors. They weren't flowing from genuine care, authentic interest, or real commitment to others' success. That realization began his journey from doing trustworthy things to becoming a trustworthy person. Here's how to master the art of becoming trustworthy. First, understand that trust is an outcome, not a goal. It's the natural result of consistently being someone worth trusting. Stop trying to earn trust directly and focus instead on becoming the kind of person who naturally inspires it. Second, practice what I call character before competence. Yes, skills matter. Yes, abilities count. But character, who you are at your core, matters more than anything else. All the skill in the world won't create lasting trust if it's not founded on solid character. I once watched a leader transform her entire organization, not through new initiatives or programs, but through her relentless commitment to becoming more trustworthy herself. She worked as hard on her character as she did on her competence. She focused as much on who she was becoming as what she was achieving. Third, learn to align your inner and outer worlds. Your public behavior should be a natural expression of your private character, not a performance you put on. When who you are and how you act are perfectly aligned, trust flows naturally. Fourth, practice what I call integrity in evolution. This means being honest about your growth journey. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be genuinely committed to growing, learning, and becoming better. People trust those who are authentically growing more than those who pretend to have arrived. Here's something crucial to understand. Becoming trustworthy isn't about reaching a destination. It's about committing to a journey. It's about waking up every day and choosing again and again to be someone worth trusting. I've seen entire cultures transform when leaders focused on becoming trustworthy, rather than just appearing trustworthy. I've watched struggling teams become powerhouses when their members committed to growing in character, not just competence. I've seen relationships rebuild themselves when people focused on becoming worthy of trust rather than trying to earn it directly. Remember this: trust isn't just about what you do, it's about who you are. And who you are is shaped by every choice you make, every value you uphold, every principle you maintain. So I challenge you, shift your focus from earning trust to becoming trustworthy. Instead of asking, how can I get people to trust me? Ask, how can I become someone worthy of trust? Start with honest self-reflection. What aspects of your character need strengthening? Where might there be gaps between who you want to be and who you are? What values do you need to embrace more fully? Because here's the truth. In a world where trust often seems scarce, those who commit to becoming genuinely trustworthy become invaluable. They don't have to convince people to trust them. Their character speaks for itself. The most trusted people I've ever known weren't the ones who tried hardest to be trusted. They were the ones who worked hardest at becoming trustworthy. They understood that trust isn't something you pursue directly. It's something that naturally follows character. Master this principle, and you'll find that trust isn't something you have to chase. It's something that naturally flows from who you become. Because when you commit to becoming someone worth trusting, trust becomes not a goal to achieve, but a natural outcome of your character. Remember, every choice you make either moves you toward or away from becoming someone worthy of trust. Choose wisely, choose consistently, and watch how trust naturally grows in the fertile soil of genuine trustworthiness. The journey to trust begins and ends with this simple but profound truth. Become someone worth trusting, and trust will follow as naturally as dawn follows night.